Password enter. Welcome to BRT Online.
When you think of a werewolf, what kinds of imagery come to mind? Forests? Wilderness? Lack of civilization? The werewolf, by and large, is a creature of the wild, in some ways, a metaphor for the sheer brutality and savagery of nature. And with a few exceptions, the tribes of the Gauru follow that mold. We've already covered the Bone Gnars, who are one of the two urban-dwelling tribes. Today, we're covering the other urban tribe, the Glasswalkers. However, the Glasswalkers are a breed apart from the Bone Gnars. While the Bone Gnars live in the city, they still remember they are servants of the wild. The Glasswalkers, however, are in many ways a complete rejection of what it means to be Gauru. Rather than serving the wild and nature, the Glasswalkers instead serve the Weaver and civilization. This decision has led to them being the most persecuted and hated among the tribes. Let's just say if it weren't for the more immediate threat of the Black Spiral Dancers, the other tribes would likely be making war with the Glasswalkers. To begin, the Glasswalkers were not always the Glasswalkers. The tribe has changed names at least 4 times throughout history. First, they were the Warders of Men in prehistory and ancient history, then the City Warders in the medieval era and Renaissance, then the Iron Riders during the Industrial Revolution, finally settling on Glasswalkers in the 1890s. As to how the Walkers began, there are 2 possible origin myths. The first myth says that the Silver Fangs sent a pack of werewolves to observe humanity. The pack was known as the Warders of Men, and its job was not just to observe, but also to make sure humans did nothing that would offend Gaia. However, the Warders were intrigued by what humanity was doing. Humans were crafting the first tools by sharpening rocks and attaching them to sticks. Fascinated, the Warders asked the Spirit of Rock to teach them this gift. Rock said, "If you give us the ability to fly, we will teach you." The Warders crafted their own tools and learned Rock's gift. The second myth is that the original Warders of Men were Gauru that were too weak to survive in the wild, and so hid among humanity to survive. Living among humans, the Warders discovered that while weak and fragile, they were also intelligent and clever. They had found ways to survive in this savage world. They planted seeds and bred animals so they wouldn't have to venture out for food, fashioned rocks and sticks into weapons so they could hunt and defend themselves. The Warders were fascinated, and by emulating the human ways, they found a new purpose in life. Now, the former is more mythological and speaks to the tribe's values, while the latter is more legendary and more historically plausible, but it's unknown which is correct due to the lack of written records from this period in the tribe's history. During the Impergium, the Warders of Men actively opposed the culling of humanity. Their argument was that mass genocide benefited the worm. Of course, given that they also bred with as many human tribes as they could, they certainly had an interest in either preventing it or limiting it. Where the War of Rage is concerned, the Glasswalkers believe that the ancient Gauru started it because they invaded the territory of other Pharaoh. Overall, they believe that the War of Rage was a mistake and that the different breeds should have kept to their own spaces. Now, archaeological evidence puts the Warders' earliest recorded settlements in the Middle East, more specifically the area that now consists of Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, and Israel. In fact, the Warders began hiding among the Jews and... began adopting the customs and myths of the Jews as a cover so as to remain hidden in plain sight while still being able to practice their ways. Other evidence shows that the Warders were found as far as ancient China. They were known as the Buli Zosuja, who adopted the advanced technologies of the ancient Chinese, as well as the philosophies of Confucianism, legalism, and Buddhism. To this day, the tribe still debates as to which of these is the correct origin for the tribe. China has stronger evidence to back up its claim, while Palestine has icons of cockroach, the tribe's totem, dated before China, as well as records of the Warders residing in Rome as far back as 60 BCE. In fact, the Warders actually took to life in Rome quite well. Rome was a technologically advanced civilization that was also infected with worm taint, unfortunately. Vampires had dug themselves deep into the heart of Rome, and being undead, they spread the corruption of the worm, knowingly or not. It also didn't help that the Silverfangs in Rome at the time did more to get in the Warders' ways than actually help them. But when Julius Caesar seized control of Rome, the Warders were able to drive the Fangs out of power and get the vampires under their boot. However, Rome expanded too far and stretched its resources too thin, leaving it vulnerable to attacks from the Germanic tribes assisted by their werewolf kin from the Geta Fenris. Following the collapse of the Roman Empire, the vampires managed to get one up on the Warders as it became easier for them to manipulate single key humans to gain control of smaller city-states, mainly in northern Italy. With the vampires closing in around them, the Warders took refuge in the Catholic Church. This ended up making them no friends among the other tribes, as the early church was hostile to pagans, killed more than a few kinfolk, and taught people that wolves were demons. So the idea that any Gauru would support such an institution seemed like madness to them. But just like they did with the Jews, the Warders adopted the ways of the church as a means of camouflage. They didn't just do this in Christendom either. Warders residing in the Ottoman Empire took the teachings of Islam and used it to hide as well. During the Renaissance, a warder camp known as the Tetrasomians was formed and led the tribe for much of it. It took the Renaissance ideas of rationality and logic and began applying them to the Gauru, but also engaged in strange occult rituals that flirted with the worm a bit too close. Their main goal was to balance the various aspects of their souls, which were modeled after the Greek gods and triad, so as to better understand the struggle they had to wage and their place in it. While the Tetrasomians were great scholars of the Gauru, they were rigid in their structure and hierarchy. Warders with higher rank were seen as wiser, stronger, and better, and so were trusted with more responsibility. During the Enlightenment and American Revolution, the tribe began to splinter as younger warders began to question the Tetrasomians. There was a call to abolish the Tetrasomians and reorganize the tribe, and would have succeeded if not for a great discovery in 1829. Patrick Schuld, a warder philodox, sent letters out to 19 of his tribesmen to join him in Philadelphia. His letters made mention that he had discovered a great new spirit. They gathered in Philadelphia where they would watch the testing of Old Ironside, a 5-ton locomotive, and there they met the spirits Schuld spoke of. Stourbridge Lion it was called, born of the locomotive. He spoke to the warders and promised them that if the warders made him and his brothers great, he would never leave their side and make them the envy of all Gauru. These 20 warders would be the first Iron Riders who would take the tribe in a new direction. Throughout the days of the Wild West, the Iron Riders were not well liked by the other tribes with their affinity for the emerging technology that was Weaver in origin, but the native and European tribes warred with each other frequently, so the Iron Riders found a way to make themselves useful, indispensable in fact. How they did this was that they rode the railroads to ferry supplies to the various tribes that needed them. So while the other tribes weren't big fans of them, they at least recognized, yeah, these guys are at least useful. Now, while the Industrial Revolution gave the tribe a new lease on life, it also brought the end of the Tetrasomians. While the Tetrasomians liked the rationality of the Enlightenment, the rejection of the ancient texts rubbed them the wrong way. It also goes without saying that the younger members of the tribe felt the same way toward them for rejecting philosophers of the day like Voltaire and Kant. Things got worse in London when an old wormbane named Stanum was awoken by the waste and pollution from factories and industry. The Tetrasomians went into the Umbra to stop Stanum and managed to do so, but paid for it with their lives. With the Tetrasomians dead, leadership defaulted over to the Iron Riders. Back in China, the bully Zosuja found themselves oppressed by the Manchus due to the worm getting its fangs deep within the dynasty. So with that, the bully Zosuja made an exodus to Hong Kong, where they set up one of the tribe's biggest seps. In 1882, back in London, an Iron Rider ragabash named Adam Sutton began hearing noises coming from the alleyways. It wasn't until he figured out to go into the Umbra that he discovered its source. What he found was the city father of London, the spirit of London itself. Soon after, more city mothers and fathers were found across the world. It was also quite timely, as with the completion of the Northern Pacific Railroad in continental America, the Riders had begun to feel that they had completed their mission, and so the Iron Riders stepped down as the leaders of the tribe, and power shifted over to their successors, the Glass Walkers, who have remained the face of the tribe to this day. The only problem initially was that the Walkers lacked the resources and power of their predecessors, and they had to contend with the Wise Guys, a competing camp in the tribe that had the resources to dominate due to its connections with the Mafia. What kept the Glasswalkers in power was that their popularity among the tribe was so great, even the Wise Guy knew it was best to leave things as they were. In the 90s, the tribe discovered that a camp known as the Cyberdogs were experimenting on unwilling lupus with cybernetic enhancements and implants thanks to the random interrupts. A Walker camp adapted using technology with a considerable presence on the internet. A civil war sparked and Glasswalker was killing Glasswalker. While the Cyberdogs were a rapidly growing force within the tribe, they were quickly put down. When the dust settled, power had shifted to the random interrupts as the leaders of the tribe, which is where the Glasswalkers find themselves today. There isn't a tribe in the Gauru Nation that is closer to humanity than the Glasswalkers. They have always maintained a close relationship with humans and are consistently the only tribe to act in its defense. Most tribes will at most protect their kinfolk and nothing more, or in the case, for example, of the Black Furies or Bone Gnawers, a certain group within the human race. The Glasswalkers, they act for all humans. Other tribes, though, think that because the Walkers have remained so close to humans, they forget their Gauru. As observed throughout their history, the Walkers have never been ones to shun technology. While many other tribes have no problem with technology, they approach it in a more pragmatic fashion. I use this piece of tech because it's useful to me and nothing more. The Walkers, by contrast, are fascinated by it. They don't just see a useful tool, they see the endless potential in it to do good, and how it must be kept free of worm taint. And because even spirits reside in technology, the Walkers are always ready to jump in to strike pacts with them, something that the other tribes arguably are blind to. Because while preserving the wild is good and all, it doesn't make much of a difference when the enemy is able to appropriate more advanced tools and gaining the advantage. As such, the Walkers made a hard decision that has cost them a great deal of standing within the Gauru Nation. Now granted, the tribe as a whole hasn't completely abandoned the wild, but there are camps within it that worship the Weaver, such as the Cyberdogs, that threaten to take it over. But the tribe is close enough to the Weaver that the other tribes are distrustful of them, especially the Red Talons. Glasswalker and Red Talon in the same room is less like oil and water and more like oil and fire. It can be argued that no tribe has suffered more persecution in the Gauru Nation than the Glasswalkers, but they've adapted to it and endured. And that's a good point to make. Adaptation is the Glasswalkers' biggest strength. They've always been the first tribe to know when the winds are changing and to go along with it. The fact that their name has changed 4 times through their history is proof of that. The other tribes take this to mean that they hold no pride in their identity, but for the Walkers, change is their identity. It's why their tribal totem is Cockroach. Cockroach is a spirit that adapts to any environment it finds itself in. Cockroach has been around longer than many of the other totems and will likely be around after the apocalypse, and all because of its knack for adaptation. The relationship that the Walkers have formed with Cockroach is similar to that of a business arrangement. He scratches their back and they scratch his. Another unique thing about the Glasswalkers is how they've remained closer to human society and religion more than any other tribe. Glasswalkers have been found in institutions of religion, academia, industry, business, and government throughout history. In the current nights, a Walker camp known as the Corporate Wolves have managed to find themselves in the highest echelons of business, and so the Glasswalkers are one of the wealthiest tribes. That wealth has allowed them to build cairns at the top of skyscrapers and act as a bulwark against the worm-infested Pentex and its many subsidiaries. 90 to 95% of the tribe is Hamid, and that should be a surprise to nobody. Metis are treated well within the tribe and are actually given a chance to succeed. Lupus do exist, but there are so few of them that they're kept as prized pets by sept leaders. As such, Walker Lupus are very submissive and act more like dogs than wolves. Glasswalkers also don't claim any specific part of the world as their territory. In fact, they're the most cosmopolitan of the tribes. Walker septs across the world operate differently according to their respective philosophies. Glasswalkers also have an interesting relationship with their kinfolk. On the one hand, the Walkers are very close and involved with their kinfolk, and on the other, they treat them in many ways like corporations treat employees. Numbers on a balance sheet. However, the Walkers know that it's in their interest to stay on their kinfolk's good side regardless, since some of them have money and power that could be potentially wielded against them. As for what groups they draw on, historically the Walkers were close with the ancient Jews and Chinese, but given their global nature, they've expanded into all corners of humanity. No discrimination in the Glasswalkers. What makes the Glasswalkers appealing, at least to me, is that they bring in a cyberpunk edge into Werewolf. This is something that presents a lot of opportunity for unique story angles as well as gifts and fetishes. Up until this point, we have dealt with tribes that are still very tied to nature, and their gifts and fetishes reflect that. But the Glasswalkers, instead being tied to civilization and technology, turn that on its head. Glasswalkers allow you to make a character that can manipulate technology and dive into the spiritual aspect of it. Cyberpunk plays with virtual reality frequently. Now imagine what that would look like in the Umbra. Not only that, there are walkers with cybernetic enhancements, which presents other cool ideas to play with. I could easily play a walker that's either a hacker or partially cybernetic, but that's way too easy. So how do I tweak it to make it more interesting? Given that walkers have this air of being technophiles among the other tribes, I would want to eschew that stereotype. Make a Glasswalker that, while he has his beliefs, doesn't forget that he's a creature of the wild. Make one that acts as a middleman between the wild and the Weaver. Now for fictional characters for inspiration. I would start off with a 90s Keanu Reeves cyberpunk flick you might have heard of, Johnny Mnemonic. In this movie, Keanu Reeves plays a hacker/info courier in where sensitive information is literally uploaded into his brain to be delivered to whomever paid for it. Keanu Reeves in this would make a great Glasswalker ragabash. Next up, Batman. Can easily be Philodox from the corporate wolves. By day, a billionaire playboy. By night, a high-tech vigilante. The Batcave alone would make a great Walker Karen. While we're on that, Oracle as well. Seeing as how she's the hacker in the DC universe, up until they made her Batgirl again, she could work as either a Walker from the Random Interrupts or a Walker kinfolk. I'd also recommend checking out the cyberpunk novel Snow Crash. One of its main characters' hero protagonist, no, really, that's his name, describes himself on his business card as the world's greatest sword fighter and last of the freelance hackers. Not only that, it's got some cool ideas for virtual reality that could be applied to Werewolf. Word of warning though, the book is great, but it's also super weird. I'd also recommend characters from the Metal Gear Solid games, particularly Solid Snake, Otacon, and Raiden. Snake and Otacon have traits that can easily be implemented in Werewolf, such as Snake's stealth and high-tech gadgets he makes use of on missions. Otacon's a hacking and tech genius, and Raiden, after his body's converted into a cyborg one during Metal Gear Solid 4, would make a devastating cybernetic Glasswalker Arun.
Swinging wide open!
My last recommendation would be Section 9 in Ghost in the Shell standalone complex. Personally, I have mixed feelings toward this anime, but it does the best job of showing how Section 9 operates as a unit and would serve as a good basis for a Glasswalker pack or sept. The Glasswalkers are scorned by the Gauru Nation for their perceived technophilia. In their eyes, they have abandoned what it means to be Gauru. Instead of the wild, they chose the Weaver. Instead of nature, they chose technology. Instead of Gauru, they chose humanity. While the Walkers have made themselves useful allies to their brothers through the ages, let's not kid ourselves. If the Black Spiral Dancers weren't around and the worm wasn't a more immediate threat, the Gauru Nation would be warring with the Walkers. The Glasswalkers are persecuted, but they've adapted. But to say that they're technophiles with no pride is just wrong. Just because the Glasswalkers like technology and humanity doesn't mean they hate nature or other werewolves. They don't even hate the traditions that the other tribes still cling to. They understand there's a place for those things. But they also understand that times have changed. The worm is getting its hands on more advanced tools and weapons to use against them. If left unchecked, it could taint the Weaver, and if that happens, the werewolves will truly lose. They can't stop the apocalypse, it's coming. But they can give the Gauru a fighting chance against the worm, and it can only be done with the help of the Weaver. Times have changed, and the werewolves need to change with it.
Don't you try